Well, this is about a story I want to tell you about the second home that I ever owned, and that was in Twin Falls. I had been offered a job in a church in Twin Falls, and through so many promises and stuff by a couple of ministers that were in charge of the church there, they offered me a ministry in this church with a pretty good salary. And so I was excited about moving to Twin Falls. And because of their promises that didn't turn out to be true, now they didn't know they were going to break their promises probably, but the fact is it happened. And I bought a home I couldn't afford. And so here I am in a big, beautiful home that is a nice big brick home with several bedrooms and a nice full basement. And oh my, it was a beautiful place. And there's a story about how I got into that, which is another story. But this is afterwards. So now I moved into this thing, but now I don't have the money to pay for it. And I'm kind of really in a dark hole here, not knowing what to do. Now, as you know, I have quoted scriptures before, two of them my favorite ones. One of them is pressed down, shaken together, and running over. Now, that's what God does. He gives back to you when you give to him. And then the other one is delight yourself in the Lord, and he'll give you your heart's desires. That's Psalms verse 37, Psalms 37 verse 4. So this was some scripture that I was practicing, and as I have shared in some of my other testimonies, that God has been pretty well true to his word and has kept his word for me and to me all along life's pathway as we've been going, as I've told you story after story. Well, this is one that looked pretty dark. How am I going to afford this home that I just bought? I didn't know how I was going to be able to do it. And then I saw in the newspaper there was a advertisement for a job with Consolidated Freightways. And they were offering a job for someone who would be what they call, you could call it a public relations man. I guess that's what you'd call it. Somebody whose job was to visit the customers and keep the customers happy by taking them to dinner, taking them golfing. I mean, what a job. They even offered a new car. They offered a nice salary. And your job was just to be able to visit all of your customers and see to it that they continue to use our business to do their shipping. So that would have been the job, and I wanted that job. That would have been great. But when I went to apply for the job, I remember going up to this building where the Consolidated Freightways were, and there was a line of men wanting that job from the door out, down the steps, and out across the yard. And I would say there was at least 20 or more people standing in line applying for that job. Well, I almost turned around and left. But for some reason or other, I stayed, and I waited until it was my turn to be interviewed by a couple of big shots from Salt Lake. And after they interviewed me and wanted to know all they could find out about me, they gave me an application and sent me home and said, fill this application out, and we're going to pick 3 men, they said. And out of those 3, we'll have another meeting and we'll interview those 3, and out of those 3, we're going to pick 1 man. So you get this filled out and get it sent in to us, so in case we pick you as one of the 3. Well, I just ignored it. I thought, what kind of a chance have I got with 20-some people in line there trying to get that job? And it shows you what little faith I had at that time. I just ignored it. I didn't fill out the paperwork. And so I let it go. Well, I got a phone call one day, and it was Consolidated Freightways. They said, where's the paperwork we gave you to fill out? And I said, well, I never got it filled out. He said, get it filled out and get it in here. You're one of the 3. Whoa, I was shocked. For somebody who didn't even try to fill it out, you'd think they would have let me go right off the bat. But no, they wanted me to bring that paperwork in. So I did. And it turned out when I got in with the paperwork all filled out, they said, you know what, we're not going to interview the other two. We want you. I mean, I was shocked. Why would they wanted me? They weren't even going to interview the other people. So what they did was they hired me on the spot. And they gave me a brand new car. And they gave me a great salary, which I don't remember what the salary was, but it was a tremendous salary. And my job was to visit our customers, people around Twin Falls and Burley and around that area who did shipping. And anything that they shipped, it was my job to make sure they continued to use us instead of IML or some of the other shipping companies. And so my job was to keep our customers happy. And I was often taking some of the people who did shipping, I'd take them out to breakfast or to dinner. I'd take them golfing. Matter of fact, I had a motorhome at that time. I took some of them out hunting. It was all paid for by the company. What a job. Plus a new car. Plus I had a credit card. And whenever I filled that car with gas, whether it was for personal use or whatever, I got to use the credit card and I didn't have to buy my own gas. I mean, talk about being blessed. What a blessing that was. And so I went to work for that company there for the next few years. And if you remember clear back in the 70s when the first time that the crisis hit us with the gas supply, gas went from 35 cents a gallon to 75 cents a gallon. I mean, all of a sudden there was a crisis in there, and the big companies all around the country had to lay off people like myself. So though I had worked there a couple of years, they laid me off because now they had to lay people off because they couldn't afford to have somebody doing what I was doing as long as we were having the shortage and the gas, what do you call it?
A fuel shortage.
The what?
A fuel shortage.
Yeah, fuel shortage and stuff. So that pretty well cut me out of the job, which is going to be a miracle in itself. Because during the time that I was working for Consolidated Freightways and was getting paid a nice salary and all of that, there was this desire to be out and speaking and sharing the gospel on my own. And that was when God began to open the doors for that. Here I needed a job all of a sudden, and I got a phone call immediately after I was laid off. And the phone call was for me to travel to Montana. I remember where I went to speak to a Full Gospel Businessmen's convention. And it wasn't long. And after that one, I had another one and another one, and there never was an end to the paychecks. It just kept happening. God continued to bless until I went from a Consolidated Freightways man that, what's the name I'm looking for? That keeps your customers happy. Public relations man. I went from that to singing and ministering all over the country and sharing the gospel. And that turned into a whole thing where eventually I moved to the Tri-Cities, where I worked with the different drug addicts.
And we went from Twin Falls to Lewiston.
Well, that's the... I'm getting help from Daryl. I'm trying to remember this as it happened. This was back in the 70s, so I'm having a tough time remembering it. Remember, this isn't professional, so just take this the way it comes and the way I'm trying to remember how it all happened. All I can tell you is this, that God blessed every corner that I took, every time I made a change. Every time something happened that looked like it was bad, it turned out to be good, because God says all things work together for good to those of us who love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. And everything that ever happened to me that looked bad turned out to be good. And it can be the same thing with you. If you turn your life over to Jesus, you tell him you're an admitted sinner, you want your forgiveness, God will forgive you. He will bless you from then on. But you've got to practice the principles that it talks about in the Bible. You got to do the things that God says to do. Practice those principles and watch God bless you. Practice the principle of being joyful instead of being sad. Remembering to delight in him instead of having a wrong attitude. You can do it. And when you do that, God will see you through. And he'll bless you every time. God bless you. Now, there's a little button down there where you can subscribe, and that's just so that you can get in on some of the other stories and testimonies that I want to tell. So thank you very much. Again, forgive the unprofessional way this is done, but we don't care. We get it done, and that's what's important. God bless.